right.
All right, we are recording. So to answer your question from 2 seconds ago, no, we're good. We've got our third episode of the We Were Young podcast going on. Today we are honored. By the way, I'm trying out a new microphone, so I gotta lean close. Dustin's is in transit. Today's guest was in Apache Troop, Sergeant Radio Telephone Operator with Apache Troop out of Tainan, 1969 to 1970. Came home, had a very long, distinguished career in the furniture industry, business. He eventually retired and liked his retirement ceremony so much, he went back to work so he could retire again. We're talking today with Sergeant James. A lot of people want to call him Braun, but it's James Braun. Got that, Doc? You seem to be the one who keeps saying Braun the most. But thanks for joining us today, Jim.
Yes, sir. My pleasure.
All right. And you showed me your hat earlier. For the people watching on YouTube and Facebook, what hat you rocking in honor of?
Honoring, can you see that?
Raise it up. There we go. World War II veteran, and that's a specific honor for someone in your life, right?
That is for my dad, Kathy's dad, who you gentlemen had the pleasure of meeting.
We did.
My uncle Ralph, who fought all across Europe. He was in Patton's bunch. And every World War II vet, because those guys are my ultimate heroes.
You're all heroes, although none of you we've talked to will ever accept the hero nickname, even though you have claimed giving the hero nickname to Craig Jorgensen after all these years.
I believe that is correct. Yes, I did.
All right. And on the subject of hats, I will pick mine. My desk is a total mess because I've been finally going through my dad's affairs, and I have pictures everywhere for that. But in honor of that, I'm going to choose this hat, actually from friend of the movie, Darren Wanless. So this is my dad's company logo. He got it when we played softball with Customs and Border Protection. We were terrible because we could never field a full team because everyone was always on shift work. But you knew you played us by the end because, especially in tournaments, we got kind of drunk and actually played better. But I've worn this hat on many a film set since then, so let's wear it today. How are you, Dustin?
I'm great. I'm having one of those mosquito-filled child screaming in the background good days. Yeah.
Yeah,
they're only good if you really like being a parent, and I really like being a dad. So even in the weirdest moments, it's such a riot. So I have to kind of step back and laugh at my children. I'll be all right.
I have to say, distance learning with two 13-year-olds has been a treat. Let's put it that way. It's been a treat.
That's right.
Be happy, Jim, that your kids are grown and on their own.
Yes, grandchildren are the best.
Yeah. And you have, but you are not free. You're just telling us you have a brand new puppy to go with your dog already.
We do.
How old's your new dog?
Levi just turned 3, and Patrick is about 3 months.
Oh, nice. That's a nice age range.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But they get along well. Levi's very tolerant. He's a good-natured boy, so they're good playmates for each other most of the time.
All right, and Dustin, special for you, I am going to step back and let you start this week.
Oh, thanks, Dave. Jim, I'm gonna start with everybody's favorite. How did you end up in Vietnam?
Okay. When I got out of high school, I attended college for 2 years, Southeast Missouri State, Cape Girardeau, Missouri. After 2 years, I kind of dropped out to earn some additional money because I felt bad about my parents footing the bill. So I wanted to drop out for 6 months, make some more money, and go back. However, when I dropped out, I lost my student deferment. And within 6 months, I got the letter in the mail. And I believe mine said greeting, not greetings, that I was drafted. I got it the day I got it. My mother was distraught, of course. I remember my dad, he was sitting in a chair in the family room, and I walked in and said, "Dad, guess what happened today?" He goes, "What?" I said, "I got drafted." And he looked up and he kind of thought for a minute and he said, "Well, okay, maybe you'll have a little more sense when you get out." That was his initial, not in a mean way, because those 6 months when I had dropped out of school and was working, I was pretty much just drifting and partying, like everybody else, probably woefully ignorant of what was really happening in Southeast Asia at the time as well. So got drafted, got inducted, 8 weeks at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, basic training, 10 weeks at Fort Ord, California for advanced infantry training. Got a 16-day leave, which I thought should have been 30. So I actually wound up taking a 30-day leave. Reported to Fort Lewis, Washington, 14 days late. Got in a little trouble for that. There's 3 types of court martials. I got the lowest grade court martial, a summary court martial. And for my punishment, I was fined a month's salary, which was $99. And I was reduced in grade from E2 to E1. So I was almost the lowest you could be anyway, getting out of training. So I got reduced down one more. And I thought, man, if I would have known this, I would have taken another couple weeks.
What are they going to do? Send you to Vietnam?
That was our mantra throughout training. And interestingly enough, there were so many guys reported late that I hung around Fort Lewis, I think, for about 10 days waiting for my court martial. Wow. And I just spent the time dodging details and stuff. But that was all what we call a good time. That counted against my 2 years. So I was pretty cool just going around Fort Lewis. Finally, I got my day in court, got my sentence, and was sent on. I left the States on July 4th, 1969. And I remember sitting on the plane, and Dave, I know we'll keep this clean. And I'm thinking, oh, this is a real effing Independence Day. I'm going to Vietnam today. Flew into Cam Bay, wound up in Ben Hoa. And once again, the Army lost track of me for like about 2 weeks. So I was just running around, dodging details, doing this, doing that in Ben Hoa. And I didn't feel the need to tell anybody, hey, shouldn't I be out in the jungle somewhere? So I just kind of hung out. Eventually, they found me again. And like Dwayne, I got on a chopper, ended up in Tay Ninh base camp with the Apache Blues, which I thought was an omen because you guys probably know I'm a huge St. Louis Blues hockey fan. And when I got there and said, you're going to be in the Blues, I thought, well, this probably isn't going to be so bad. And then later I may have revised my opinion of that. But that was it. And there I was in the Blues.
So for the 2 weeks that they lost you after you arrived in country, were you pulling, like we would joke around at customs, like if you want to look busy, just grab a clipboard and walk around like you have a purpose? But is that what you would do? Like just
pretty much. I didn't do a lot of hard laboring of any type that I recall. I just tried to stay in the background and away from the NCOs and all that. So yeah, it was pretty cool, all things considered. And again, that was more good time off my 2 years. So
probably better food there than when you got to Tay Ninh.
Probably was, yeah. And they had a nice big service club there. I remember where they had pretty good live music sometimes and that. So all in all, it was a pretty nice experience.
What called you to the radio work?
I was thinking about that earlier today. I think originally I carried it for my squad. I was in 4-1. I think maybe the guy who had been carrying it might have been leaving. And it might have been also because I was probably one of the biggest guys in the platoon. So they said, yeah, give it to him. And also they found out somehow that I was an English major and I had a reasonable grasp of English language. So they said, okay, you take the radio. And I guess that was it.
Can you talk a little bit about the radio telephone, like how big it was and what it actually, how it worked?
Well, it weighed, I think it was, Dustin, about 25 pounds. Okay. It was called a PRC Prick 25, and I think it weighed about 25 additional pounds. Always carried an extra battery pack on the bottom of it. It was good for everybody else to hang their crap on. You know, we hung a lot of smoke grenades on the back of it. Carried an extra long antenna, which we called a whip, that if we were in terrain where there was a lot of hills and we needed a longer antenna, hook that up every once in a while. And it was pretty basic. It had a handset, and when you wanted to talk, you pressed the button and talked into it. Other than that, I would be listening. I kind of hung it up on my helmet, so I wanted to have two hands free all the time when we were out in the field. So I hung it on my helmet, and I was always monitoring transmissions from the pink team, the Cobra and the Loach that were flying above us. And then if I had to talk, I just reach up like so, click the button, and then say what I had to say, and then go back to listening. And I guess that's about it. It was, they always said that the RTO was one of the first ones that the enemy would like to take out. So I tried to keep the aerial tucked down as low as I could most of the time.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, actually. There's an article that I see all the time on Facebook that a radio telephone operator had like a 12-second life expectancy when battles started. And I was like, wait, like you'd need to have like 42 radio telephone operators every time you went out. Like that math doesn't make sense.
That might have been a bit of a stretch, wherever you saw that. But I guess a lot of those radio telephone operators, RTOs, they weren't out there with the kind of guys that I was out there with. So maybe that had something to do with it. I do know that it really did get to be a pain in the butt a lot of times, especially going through the triple canopy jungle and dragging that thing through all of that. But I felt like I was in the right place because I felt like I was pretty effective doing what I was doing and keeping everybody informed and coordinated. So it was okay with me.
Well, actually, so you're the radio telephone operator, but you're pretty much attached at the hip to the blue lieutenant, to Blue. Would that be an accurate statement?
Yes, that would be correct. Yes.
All right, so when things hit the fan, like March 19th, March 25th, and it comes to coordinating fires, are you kind of participating in that, or is that all Blue handling that? Like, how much would you handle of the RTO compared to Blue?
Most of the coordinating would have been done. Yeah, I was involved in that, but in a pretty limited degree. Sometimes I did. A lot of the times, the Cobra pilot would be in charge of that because they had more than one radio in their chopper and they had being on more than one frequency. So like John Peel, he could talk to me and he could talk to the nearest fire base with the artillery equipment at the same time. So the Hybrid, the Cobra, did a lot of that. But there definitely were times when Blue did it. You know, I would make sure the smoke grenades were deployed in the appropriate place. So they came after the other guys, not us. Always identified it by color. Because one thing I heard about a guy one time who was talking to the Highbird said, okay, I got a red smoke out there. And all of a sudden, like 3 more red smokes appeared uh, from them monitoring our transmission. So all he ever said was smoke is deployed, ID, and then they would ID the color and we would confirm it. So, but to answer your question, blue definitely was involved sometimes in coordinating as well, especially in close fire.
Was it hard to throw with the extra 25 pounds on your back?
Was it hard to what, Dustin?
Was it hard to throw? Were you throwing grenades?
Well, no, because when the time came to do that, you had plenty of adrenaline.
But the strength was always there.
Yes, it was.
And actually, talking about bringing in the fire, I know we've talked about this when we visited with you, but for the audience, and again, this is for people listening, I am not being flipped. This is actually a serious question. You know, you've been ambushed, you're in a firefight. You know, on your radio with the push of a button, you can, I believe your term was expend some taxpayer expenses and ordnance coming in. As a 20 or 22 years old, was that, you know, in a little respect, kind of cool?
It probably was. Yeah, we were never hesitant at all to pull back when we could and spend a whole bunch of the taxpayers' money, be it rockets, artillery, more, whatever the case might be. Yes. Yeah, it was kind of a good feeling, I guess, because most of the guys, when something had happened, they had no idea what was really going on, talking to the pilot upstairs. So that was good. And I got to the point, Dave, where I almost knew what to do before it happened. Like on March 25th, as soon as we heard the firing, before we knew Craig was hit or anything happened, I got on the horn and bounced a medevac right away. I said, I don't know if we're going to need you, but get out here. So, and luckily they got here pretty quick. So it almost got to the point where I could anticipate what was going to happen and act accordingly.
And actually on March 25th, you know, you're our third person talking to Doc and Dwayne were specifically mentioned by Threlkeld that day, but you were there as well as an introduction for our audience. One of the questions I forgot to ask those two, which I think is really good for context for people who watch it, because that's like a 2.5 minute clip and it's very condensed. And I don't think people get the true sense of what that day was. How long, for people listening, between those first shots when Craig got shot and him being medevaced out, what, by your recollection, what is that time frame?
Maybe, I would think Craig might disagree. Of course, he was morphined up at that point, and Doc, but I think it was no more than 10 to 15 minutes when we got him out of there. You know, Dennis Henderson brought him back, despite what the video said. It was Dennis Henderson, rest in peace, and we got him back to the CP. And I don't think it was more than 10 to 15 minutes, Dave, that we got him out of there.
Yes, Craig would disagree. His morphine mind thinks it was forever.
Yeah, I don't think it was. It may have been a little more, but I don't think so, because the medevac, as I said, the medevac was already on the way. I bounced that immediately. So I don't think it was a great deal of time. It was time enough, if I could throw in a little side thing there, it was time enough for Threlkeld to keep trying to stick his mic in Craig's face, saying, well, how does it feel to get shot? And I was right there. I see my hand in there a couple of times, patting Craig on the head and such. And it took a great deal of my willpower to, honestly, I'm telling you, to take that microphone and put it elsewhere. I wanted to do that so bad. But anyway, we got him out of there. And then, you know, I think Dwayne told the rest of the story. We made our way back and got the heck out of there.
Yep. And for people asking, you know, everyone who was in that video did make it out of Vietnam. You know, Dennis Anderson has since passed, but he also made it home. His daughter actually gave us a lot of his pictures. So thank you, Christy.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he took some great ones.
Yeah. Like you're saying, though, you did get a sense, like it became second nature to bounce that medevac when the bullets started flying. As we've asked everyone else on before, can you remember that first day when you were in combat? Like what was it like for you the first time enemy fire came your way?
The first time, it was all so very new and so very strange that I didn't know quite what the heck to do. And somebody more experienced, you know, said, "Get your butt down." And I really don't remember the specifics of the fight, Dave. The first memory I really have of something bad happening was we had been out on an all-night ambush, and I had only been with the Blues maybe, I don't know, maybe a month or so. An all-night ambush. We painted ourselves up, went out there, nothing happened. We got back, first light, they pulled us out, and we had just dumped our gear, and the horn went off for a scramble, and we went right back out and went through a lot of really thick jungle for a down bird. It was not one of ours, but it was a Huey, and it must have crashed, maybe mechanical failure or shut down when it was moving really fast, because it exploded. And we found 10 bodies that morning, and not one of them was recognizable, you know, as a human being. And we were there all day trying to dig them out, get them in, you know, the bags, and get them back to an LZ. And, you know, we've been up all night on the ambush, and it was an all day. And by last light, we were still trying to get through the jungle to get them out. Some of them we just couldn't. It was too exhausting. And a couple of the little birds came down in a little bomb crater, and we put some of the bodies in there. And they finally got us out at last light. We got back in the LZ, and right as we were lifting off, it was raining a little. It was almost dark, and the tree line, some of them in the tree line opened up on us. And normally the door gunners were the only ones that would fire. We would not discharge our weapons once we're in the chopper. Everybody was shooting into the tree line. And we got out of there and got back, went over to the EM club. Bartender said, "We out there today?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Here's, have a free beer," and just reflected. And that was the first time I think that I really, really realized what the hell I was into over there, and what we were all into over there. So that was my first real graphic impression of what the place was like.
That would do it. And it is important to point out, like we have in our interviews with you guys, you know, it's not like Hollywood makes it out to be on a crash. It's very vivid what you guys remember for that, and it's not a happy place.
Yeah, and some of the guys I mentioned before, I think Engelbrecht or some of the guys, the aroma, the smell, it never leaves. It never leaves you. You know, I think that sense was working more than any other of my senses that day. So anyway, that was welcome to Vietnam.
Yeah.
Jim, besides the pilots that you were sharing space with in Tay Ninh, did you ever get a chance to meet any of the other guys on the other end of the radio?
Most of the pilots, no, not really, not at the time, because we lived, our hooches were in one section of the base camp. The officers And the warrant officers, with the pilots, a lot of them were warrant officers,
Right.
and some were regular officers. They lived on the other side of the base camp. So not until the reunions did I really start to get to know any of the pilots. I knew their voices and I knew their call signs just from hearing them so often, but we never associated back in the base camp. No.
Unless you pulled one of them out of the jungle, then they kind of liked you guys a bit more.
Yes, it was a mutual admiration society, I think, because we loved them and they loved us. We just didn't hang out together. But it didn't matter, I guess, because when the shit hit the fan, everybody was all in all the time. I mean, everybody. So great bunch of guys.
Yeah, and like we said, this isn't so much about, in terms of this podcast, it's more about coming home. Actually, Dustin, I'm going to let you go. I'm trying to formulate something here.
All right.
Sorry.
Jim, what was your coming home experience like? Both in leaving the troop and then also reuniting with your family stateside.
Yeah, leaving the troop was such a rush because a lot of the guys that I had been there with were already gone. I stayed over an extra 50 days so I could get out of the Army when I got home. They had a program at that point, because they were starting to try to wind down a little, that if you got back in the States with less than 150 days active duty, then you got what they called an early out. And they would let you extend. So as I mentioned, I left Fort Lewis on July 4th, 69, which means I would have come home on July 3rd of 70. But I extended my time over there so I would come home with exactly 149 days left so I could just get out of the Army. A lot of the guys did their year and went home and did 6 months of stateside duty, which I didn't think I would be able to do at that point, saluting second lieutenants, no offense, Jack, polishing my boots, polishing my brass. I didn't foresee that in my future. So by that time, I was working in the Flight Operations Center, working the radios. I had a pretty secure job. So I got out when I got home. So I knew when I left Vietnam, not only was I going home, I was getting out of the Army. So it was like a double hit. Excuse me just a minute here. So getting home, going through the reception center, was like, okay, here you are. You look like you're pretty healthy. Check this, check this, check this, and they turn you loose. But I came home through Oakland, and I flew home through the San Francisco airport, which, of course, at the time was the epicenter of all the protests. So I saw a lot of that. I thought maybe I was the enemy when I wore my uniform, my dress greens, when I flew home, because you got a third off on your flight. So I wore my dress greens, didn't have a real good experience at the airport. But if you got time for a short story about the redoubtable Sergeant Robert Peyton Burroughs.
I always got time for a Burroughs story.
We happened to wind up, he was going home on leave because he was going back. And we wound up, as fate would have it, in the airport at the same time, waiting for our flights. So we were sitting in the bar having a beer. I got up to use the restroom, came back, and on either side of Burroughs were these two, what you would call hippies, protesters, whatever they may be. They were looking him up and down. He was ignoring them. I came back in the bar, saw this scene. I stopped and thinking to myself, this is going to be entertaining. So they were looking at him, and he was ignoring. Finally, one of them said, "Hey, man, what do you do?" Set his beer down, looked at both of them, and he simply said, "Well, I kill folk. Do you want a demonstration?" And that was the end of the conversation. And they kind of slunk off their bar stools and made their way out of the bar. And as they walked by me, I remember saying, "You made a good decision to leave." So even though there was a lot of harsh shit going on with the protesters, pardon my language, there was some vindication by seeing Burroughs kind of give these two guys a piece of his mind.
And he was like the prototypical soldier, right? Like
he was the prototypical professional infantry soldier. About 6'3", big guy, probably 26, firmly believed in reincarnation. You know, he had fought in the Gallic Wars with Caesar. He had fought, excuse me, I was petting Patrick there. He fought in World War II with Patton, and he was determined to get killed in Vietnam anyway, I believe, so he could move on. And, you know, sadly say he's on the wall now, but he was the, you know, Sergeant Rock prototype. That was Burroughs. Yes.
So he was kind of like a real life Lieutenant Dan. It was his destiny to fall in combat.
It was, and I don't think he would have had it any other way, honestly. So I guess to get back to your question, Dustin. So
the airport. I got a new one for you. Let's go back a little bit. How did you rotate from being in the field with the radio to being in the talk?
They just need, you know, guys rotate out of country, and they needed somebody to help coordinate, you know, the helicopter flights and talk to the guys and that. And being as I was already well versed in speaking on the radio and you know, in radio lingo, the phonetic alphabet, and how to talk, they offered it to me, and I said, yeah. I was on the field almost a year, I guess, close to it. And I said, yeah, it's probably time. So that's how I wound up in the TOC, or, you know, the Operations Center, as they called it.
Right.
What was it like for you, though, having been in the field for a year to being in the TOC, and you're listening to these guys out in the field? Would you just like want to, like, could you sense when maybe they should be doing something else and just want to be out there to help them, or were you just over it?
Well, I wasn't monitoring the blues frequency. I was monitoring all the flights.
Okay.
You know, the lift birds and the cobras and the loaches and that kind of thing. And I mean, I wasn't in charge by any means. I was just a guy in there who knew how to give directions and give, you know, read instructions and that. So I was kind of a clerical position, I guess.
But you earned it.
I felt like I did, yes. I felt like I did. And it was cool because it was the safest place in the base camp, because it had like 1 million sandbags all around it, you know. So it was nice and cool in there, and it was safe. So yeah, it was cool. Do my 8 hours a day, and that'd be it.
And actually, before we get back to coming home, we've learned from watching, you know, filmmakers, like you look at Randall Wallace and Braveheart, when you have a down moment, you want to have a moment of levity. So I'm going to allow you to tell a story of how you and Craig Jorgensen decided you were going to try and disrupt the enemy food supply with some grenades.
Well, we came upon, you're talking about the fish pond, right? Yes, we came across a fish pond in the middle of the jungle, and pretty quickly determined it was full of fish. It was a food supply for the enemy, and decided, you know, we were going to destroy that. So Craig Jorgensen and Ed Beal, the two greatest point men I've ever known, and they like to blow stuff up, which we all did. So we decided we were going to rig up some C4 and some detonation cord and a blasting cap, and we were going to eliminate a food source for the enemy.
Makes sense.
So yeah, it did. It all made sense. And so they set the charge. We set a perimeter up around them while they were doing it. backed off what we thought was an acceptable distance. They blew it, and oh my God, I remember laying there, and none of us was saying a word, but I remember hearing my voice go, "Son of a bitch," and everybody was full of fish guts, and so if everybody's probably seen the movie Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, where they blow up the boxcar and they use too much dynamite and the money's flying all over. That's a perfect analogy for what we had that day.
Or for our younger audience, the movie Reno 911 when they blow up the whale.
Yeah.
And we all stunk to high heaven going back on the lift ships because we're all full of it, and choppers were full of it, and the crew chiefs hated us because they had to hose out their choppers. So it was not their finest moment. Is all I can say.
But it's
Or
a
maybe
moment
it
that
was.
it's a moment that sticks with you, though.
Oh yes.
Well,
Again, going back to the olfactory being a powerful memory sense. Yeah, it certainly did stick with you.
I always love that story. But getting back to, you've landed, went through San Francisco. They gave you a third off to wear your greens, which, to quote Star Wars, it's a trap.
Yes.
But you did then make it home. Were you in St. Louis at that time?
I was. Hey, could I impose upon you guys to take about a minute break? I'm starting to lose a little of my voice. I'm going to go grab a cough drop / throat lozenge.
Yeah,
No
sure.
problem.
We'll just
Okay,
take a moment to thank our sponsors.
I'll be right back.
I'll have Dustin tell jokes. Go, Dustin, be funny.
I heard the funniest joke I've ever heard, but I can't tell it on this podcast. There's no way.
Well, thanks, you tease.
Hey, you're welcome. I'll tell it to you sometime, but you're not going to think it's funny.
Wow, you're really setting this up. I can't wait to hear it. Cannot wait to hear it.
There's a pause button. We don't have to just sit here.
Is there?
Yeah, just go up to the recording piece.
So is this where I do the Zoom face?
Yeah. Oh, what am I doing?
Okay, we are back, and I assume recording again. Dustin's great idea to pause, although
we'll find out.
I would say you missed his joke, but you didn't. No. But welcome back, Jim. We were just talking about you getting home to St. Louis, and you've gone from being in country to it's just you. Well, actually, how was your greeting with your family?
The greeting in St. Louis was wonderful. Oh, by the way, there's one other thing I didn't tell you guys, if we have time, that I would like to tell you about my family. When I found out I was going to be in the infantry and probably go to Vietnam, my dad and I made a pact that my mom would never know that. So as far as my mom was concerned, I was a supply clerk. And, never saw a bit of combat, had it really easy over there. And not until I got out of the field and felt really pretty secure, that I sent home my medals and citations and all that stuff. So we had my mom hoodwinked for a whole year that I was not in combat. But when I got home, the airport experience was great. My parents were there. My younger brother was there. Some of my friends were there. One of my friends had been in Vietnam about a year prior to me. He came out, and it was wonderful. And we went home, and my mom had a big sign in the window, "Welcome home, Blue." We all went downstairs, and my dad sat at my dad's bar and had a couple beers and visited, and it was like a dream. It wasn't real, but it was great at the same time. And I remember finally running out of gas, because I guess I'd been up for well over 24 hours and adrenaline wearing off, and went up and went to bed. And even though it was the middle of August, I was freezing. So my mom turned the furnace on for me because I was used to different climate. But it was very pleasant. Everybody was wonderful in my immediate family and all my friends. It was great.
All right. And you've talked about the olfactory sense. You've mentioned, so you're one of the first ones to mention, you know, you extended 50 days, so your first 4th of July home wasn't until almost a year later. But the fire, you've specifically mentioned that the fireworks were a tough time for you. Could you walk the audience through that?
Yeah, well, I went and hid in the basement because that was the quietest place. And it had been, you know, I'd been home 10, 11 months at that time, but it didn't seem to make any difference to my brain. It was like, Jesus, get me out of here, you know. So it wasn't good. It wasn't good. And to this day, and I always loved fireworks, you know, loved the colors and the noise and all that. But that's all changed to this day.
And again, you know, like with Dwayne last week, where he walked, you know, it's easy to say, you know, flashbacks, or it's, you know, I'm not saying easy, that may not be the right word, but it's not as in depth for, and we do want people to understand this. Like, is it just the sound for you with fireworks, or does it trigger memories, or, you know, to walk the audience through, because I think it is important to bridge the gulf and help them understand this.
Yep. Well, it is the sound, I guess, primarily, Dave, but the bright flashes are also disturbing, you know, because you see, you know, artillery going off, mortar rounds going off, especially at night. We'd get mortared or get rocket attacks at night when we were in the base camp. And not only was it loud, but the visual effect was pretty scary as well, because you knew what went along with it, you know. So I guess mostly the sound, but boy, the bright flashes and explosions, yeah, it's very disconcerting.
So, I mean, I know you go to a lot of St. Louis Cardinals games, I'm assuming. You never turn down a chance to tell us how well they've done in the playoffs.
Well, I stand on their record.
Well, I mean, I've got the Mariners here, so whatever. We're in rebuild number 42. So
Yes, right.
But I mean, sporting events, everything they do, you know, you don't really realize. You know, you always think of the 4th of July, but God, there's fireworks all over sporting events and everything else, huh?
Yeah. Well, when you know it's coming, it's much more manageable. You know, you're mentally prepared for it, and you say, okay, they're going to do this. Okay, go ahead and do it. But if you hear something go off that you're not mentally prepared for, that's when it kind of freaks you out.
Yeah, that's I can. It's understandable. But actually, we'll backtrack because, like you said, it was 10 or 11 months before that first 4th of July. After your initial wonderful greeting from your family, did you go back to work right away? Did thoughts and emotions start? Like, what was that, let's say, 1, 2, 3 months after returning home like for you?
Yeah, well, I goofed around for about 30 days, I think. And then I went to work, and just, you know, not a big time job of any kind. Worked in a department store. And it, you know, after listening to Doc and listening to Dwayne, I tried to think back more. You guys have made me think a lot, by the way, so thank you for that. Trying to think how it was. And initially, I think it was so different just being there. It was still like I was walking around in in a story or a dream or something. Just, you know, did a lot of partying, tried not to think about it very much at all. But most other people outside the people that I really knew and were really friends with, I found out pretty quickly that nobody gave a dang about Vietnam, or anybody being in Vietnam didn't really care to talk about Vietnam. So you just put it away. I was talking to Kathy today, and I remember a few months after I was home, and I was at a party, you know, the parties when you're in your early 20s with all the kids and stuff. And this girl came up to me that I worked with, and she said, "Boy, I really would like to talk to you." And I said, "Okay." She said, "You were in Vietnam, right?" And I said, "Yes, I was." She said, "Wow, that's really cool. Did you get to like kill people and stuff?" And I looked at her and I said, "What is wrong with you?" So I just got the heck out of there. And so people either thought it was some kind of a exciting vacation, or they just didn't want to talk about it at all. So I didn't talk about it at all either. You know, I'd have a bad night every once in a while, and didn't really have a girlfriend at the time. Had a couple of really good friends that would listen to me. I couldn't talk to my mom or dad about it because I just couldn't go there, you know. So I just kind of put it away as best I could.
Yeah, I mean, well, you didn't have a girlfriend, but apparently, you know, it's because you turned down the girl who wanted to talk about like killing. This is a weird way of flirting, I guess.
I don't know what she wanted actually, but yeah. Now I will tell you that I put it away most of the time. I will tell you that every December 5th, I did my best to get as absolutely intoxicated as I possibly could, and I carried that on for a whole lot of years. And I had one friend who stuck with me through that every year.
Well,
Other than that,
that's actually a lead into what I was trying to formulate earlier. And we don't have to go too far into this if you don't want, but I think it's important with yesterday being Memorial Day and honoring. I mean, there's a specific reason why December 5th is hard for you. It's not just a random date on the calendar. You chose to do that, correct?
that's correct. Yes. Do you want me to get into it a little bit?
Do you want to talk about that? Or we don't have
Oh,
to.
I'm perfectly okay with it. It's all a matter of record now,
Right.
you know. But yeah, to keep it fairly simple, we walked into a bunker complex that day, got into a fight. This was before either Craig or Ed were with us. Gary Qualley was our platoon leader. I was still carrying the radio for my squad at that point. And we walked into this bunker complex. It was pretty late in the afternoon. It was a cloudy day. And it was one of those times where you could feel it just didn't feel right. And we kept moving in at the Highbird's suggestion, and who else was telling them, I don't know. But we kind of knew we were in a bad place for sure. And I was off to one side with my squad, and I heard all the shooting go off. And my friend Tim McCrite, my best friend, he was walking point that day. Dwayne was very up near the front. Gary Qualley was our platoon leader. He was up near the front at that time. And Paul McCord was on the radio right behind them, and heard the shooting start, heard somebody scream. Turned out it was Tim later on. And this guy had just popped out of a bunker in the ground and just opened up with his AK. And he shot Tim, he shot Joey Sanchez, and he shot Gary Qualley. He got all three of them. and then I'm pretty sure probably Dwayne got him. And so it was a bad day, and we needed to get all three of them out of there, but it was too small of an area for a medevac to land. We tried to enlarge this little bomb crater to make it big enough. Chopping didn't work. So we finally medevaced all three of them out of there. And it was a bad day. There was many acts of heroism happened that day, both on the ground and in the air. The Lowbird pilot flew his Lowbird between the medevac, I think that was Rickabaugh, between the medevac and the enemy fire to take the fire himself while we were getting these guys out. We had to put them all on jungle penetrators to get them out. It was a bad day, and Tim wound up living like a week, and then he died from his internal injuries. And it's the day that not only did that happen, and I don't mind sharing this, I wound up doing some things that day that I am not proud of, but in the heat of the moment, I did them. And I guess in the same situation, I'd probably do it again. I don't know. But that has been the one thing, more than anything else, I think has haunted me all these years, because I don't have a lot of flashbacks about being in Vietnam, but I have a recurring dream that happens back here in the States, and I don't want to share everything because it's pretty personal, but I'm sure it has to do with what I did that day. So every December 5th, I'd just get out of my mind, and it was half a memorial to Timmy and Gary and Joey, and I guess the other half was trying to assuage the guilt that I felt for what I did that day. So there you have it, boys.
Well, and we've never talked about what it is, but when we talked to Dr. Clymer, I'm gonna take a stab here, and he said rage is a very common side effect of combat for soldiers, because Dwayne has told us about that day, and after Tim was shot, he just had so much rage in him, he had to be told to let up on the trigger because he was just so angry. So I hear a dog. It's a very natural human thing for you. We got a doodle just off camera.
Yeah, we just had a doodle sighting. So, well, I don't know if I agree with all of that. It's, to me, it's not natural at all. But I guess given the environment, it was natural for the time, I guess. So maybe you're right, but
well, the war is an unnatural thing.
Yeah. So anyway, that's my story on that day.
Well, and thank you for sharing that. I mean, it is, the subjects that we cover aren't easy. And just thinking about between our first and second interview with you, I know it's not easy. We've talked to everyone else about it. Look at us, Mr. Mohawk there, and me with my Star Wars behind me. You trust us to tell your story. I know it's not an easy thing, but I think it is helpful for a lot of people.
Yeah, it is, because I gave up trying to kill myself on December 5th a while back. So I guess that's a good thing, right?
Yeah. I think that's an undersell to say that's a good thing.
Yeah, except last year was the 50th anniversary of it. So I did get off the rails a little bit that day.
But you're back on them. So
yeah, I'm back on them, and I kept in contact with Tim's mom off and on over the years, found his sister a few years ago and, established contact with her. So we had a kind of a link to him through Edie, who was his mom, and Drina, who was his sister. So that helped. And Gary has met Timmy's sister as well. We went up and visited them. And so is Dwayne. We all three went up to Aledo, Illinois, where they live, visited Drina, and we all went out to visit Timmy's grave as well. Met the whole family, her kids and grandkids and everything. So it was good.
And Dustin, I'll give you a chance to shift topics if you want. I'll step back.
I was gonna ask about the gas shortage in '73 and what that was like as somebody who'd gone out and served, and I don't want to degenerate your literacy, but you seem like you had
that's quite all right.
You seem like you had a pretty good head on your shoulders for politics, so it seemed like you were paying attention at the time. What was that experience like?
The energy crisis.
Yeah,
that's what it was referred to as. Honestly, Dustin, I wasn't really going anywhere specific at that time. I was unmarried. I got to go get Levi out of here. Excuse me. Come on, buddy.
You know the rules of the internet state you can't talk about a dog and not show the dog. There we go.
Did you get him?
Yeah. He was a
Okay.
puppy when we met him.
Yeah, he's 65 pounds now.
wow.
So Dustin, it didn't really affect me all that much personally because I wasn't really going anywhere that I needed a lot of gas. I was going to school part-time on the GI Bill, had a part-time job doing nothing special, and just doing a lot of partying at that point, Had my little apartment and listened to a lot of music and drank a lot of beer, and you know the story. So, but it was a pretty weird time, to answer your question. People would get in line, forget, like if their tank got down to 3/4 full, they'd think they had to go top it off again. And there was a lot of arguments in the lines at the gas stations. And, in my opinion, it was all contrived to manipulate the economy. I always will believe that. Does that ever happen?
Who would do such a thing?
What? The government putting their hand into the economy? That would never happen.
Let's think. Maybe oil companies? No, not them. They wouldn't do that.
They wouldn't do that.
Sorry to.
It's definitely not less than $10 a barrel right now.
Yeah, but it was so bad that year, and it even affected electricity because people weren't putting up Christmas lights that year because of the quote energy crisis, and that really bummed me out more than anything else. I think because I love Christmas lights.
Yeah.
Who doesn't?
So sorry, I can't give you a better, more graphic.
That's great
story, but
that's what I wanted to know.
And Dustin's also showing off why we don't let him ask as many questions. And actually, we first met you 4 years ago, right, Dustin? 2016?
Yeah.
And we met you in Vegas, and then we visited you in St. Louis. And like I said before, you sat down and trusted these two guys to tell your life story to a bunch of strangers. And then we followed up a year later, and we talked about what that experience was like. So we'll ask again, even though we asked it on camera for our audience, what was it like for you to sit down that first time with us and just be able to tell your story? Both on the day, but then the cascading effect afterwards.
From the first interview?
From the first interview.
From the first interview. Well, it felt strange initially, but you guys had presented yourselves so well, in my opinion, and I feel I'm a fairly good judge of people and character, and your sincerity and your honesty seemed pretty apparent to me. So I was okay with it. It felt awkward at first, but you guys made it really pretty easy. And I also had this sense when you came to me, and you know, Craig had let me know that I was going to hear from you and some of this other guys. I just had this sense that maybe it's time. You know, you're 69 years old, I believe. Maybe it's time you started getting your head out of your rear and start talking about this. And you guys provided the perfect avenue for that. So when we finished the interview, I felt a huge sense of relief. And the cascading effect, what you guys did, in addition to getting us to open up, and I'm forever grateful, is you reestablished the connection and the bond among all of us guys. And that made it that much easier to talk about it because we had each other then. But maybe we would see each other but once a year, if that, before that. So that it helped on more than one level for me.
What I'm trying to figure out how to ask this without leading you in any way. You know, objective leading the witness. Well, actually, I'll say it this way: like we did not expect to see what we saw when we first sat down and started conducting these interviews. Like I've said before, this was not our original intent with this movie, was to talk about the power of talking. It's just something that we saw over time. Did you think, and I guess I'm asking this from the perspective of a veteran who may be listening, who has been wondering if they should talk, did you think it was going to be as relieving as it ended up being? Like, was, you know, what was your impression of that?
Initially, I did have some doubts about going through this process. And one of the reasons I did, Dave and Dustin, I know some of the guys are in PTSD class now. I was attending or talking to a therapist, a lady, a few years ago down at the VA, and, you know, confiding in her, and she told me, well, you definitely have some issues, and I have a program that I could get you into, and it might help you, but it might make it worse. And I wasn't willing to risk that at the time, so I just kind of cut her off and hadn't talked much since. So I wasn't sure where this was going to go. But again, what my opinion of you two guys right from the get-go, and the fact that Dwayne and Ed and Doc and Jack and Pancho were all in it as well. There's, you know, like there's strength in numbers, I guess. So that kind of made me feel like it would be okay. And it was.
It most certainly is. Thanks for trusting us, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we fooled you.
Good thing I didn't judge you by your looks, man. Just kidding.
I think he's talking to you.
Yes,
Dustin.
you did.
Just kidding.
So actually, you know, we asked this question in our second interview, and I'll ask it today for the podcast. If a veteran is watching this or listening to it once we're on an RSS feed on iTunes or something, watching or listening, and they're thinking about talking, or they're maybe even apprehensive or skeptical of talking, what would you, as a fellow veteran, tell them?
I would tell them, number one, that if they don't find someone to talk to about it, it's not going to get better. It's only going to get worse. It's going to continue to haunt you. It's going to continue to fester. So don't expect it to go away on its own. It's not going to go away. So for God's sake, talk to somebody. There's a lot of people out there today that are a lot more sympathetic to our stories and to stories of the younger veterans. There's plenty of help available through the VA. If you're fortunate enough to have a partner like I have, who you guys have met and has been a godsend for me, talk to them, talk to your friends, call me, for God's sake, talk to somebody. I have struck up a friendship with a young man. He's about your guys' age, so he's young, and he was in the Marine Corps, and he was in Afghanistan more than once, and he went through the same type of thing that we did, different scenario, same stuff, different day. And we exchanged text again yesterday, and he's got a lot of friends who were struggling. He's had more than one friend commit suicide over all this. And I keep telling him, Chris, as a matter of fact, if you guys wind up making a trip here, I think you'd enjoy talking to Chris. He's a well-heeled guy and a smart guy and went through a lot. So if you're out there and you're battling this, and you probably are, there's a heck of a lot of people who care about you, who care about how you feel, and would be happy to sit down and just listen and let you say anything you want to say to get it off your chest. And if you want anything back from us, we're here to give it to you. But it's not going to get better on its own. It just doesn't. So is it ever going to be perfect? No. Is it ever going to totally go away? No. I found that out yesterday. It was a tough day. But there's all kinds of people out there that want to hear your story, and please get it out. Please.
And yeah, I think I mentioned it in the first podcast that I thought I was a good listener before, until I started doing these interviews and I wasn't allowed to talk. Well, you guys were talking, and it taught me a lot more about listening. And I'm going to flip that question then. Let's say I'm, a son or a daughter or a wife or a husband of a veteran, and I want to talk to the veteran in my life. As someone on the other side of that, what advice would you give that person on how they could initiate, or how they could be a good partner or listener in that conversation?
Well, it might be hard for them to initiate the conversation, because I kind of feel like it probably has to come from the veteran, Dave. But you can certainly suggest and let it be known that, boy, I know this has to be bothering you. You never talk about it. You're a strong person. But I just want you to know that I'm here for you. And I would like to hear your story, because you did something for me and for our country and for everybody that you deserve a lot of credit for. And I would love to hear your story. And if you want to, I'll just sit down here and shut up and listen to anything you have to say. So I think you can suggest it and let them know that you care. That's probably the most important thing, that you do care about what they went through, and you're appreciative. I think that's important, that you're appreciative of what they did.
Well, we appreciate you, Jim. A, for what you did. B, for trusting us. C, continuing to trust us after you met us.
Yeah, that was a little more difficult, but no. But you're welcome.
You met us in Vegas and thought, what did I get myself into?
Oh, these guys seem reasonable. I'll invite them into my home.
Yeah, under supervision. Just strap that bass on, Dustin, and we'll jam, buddy.
Heck yeah, man! Anytime. Did you
That
listen to
was
that
great.
band yet?
Pardon me?
Did you listen to that band yet?
we listened to a couple of their songs, and I thought, man, Dustin must be nuts. No, I didn't give it. I didn't give it a full measure. I guess I should do that.
That's up to you, man. I'm just trying to share music.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
I understand.
I think you decided you liked me when I shared my playlist I had from my father, and it was all the Rolling Stones.
You went up. My respect for you went up several notches when I found out what kind of music you listen to.
You bet. The classics are the best.
They are.
And
They are.
to answer your earlier question, we would love to come back to St. Louis this summer, meet your friend. Hopefully, I have high hopes. When you look at the lockdowns, even what it was 2 weeks ago, I have high hopes we'll be able to leave here in August and come visit you guys if you'll have us.
Yeah, we certainly would like to figure something out if it's feasible, for sure.
Perfect. Dustin, I hand it over to you if you have anything.
My question is more about I guess my last question, Jim, would be how has just thinking about your past experiences affected your current day-to-day life? Like you said that we had been causing you some introspection, and I wonder if that's been helpful. I certainly hope it has, but have you found that to be harrowing or useful?
Well, I would say both, but much more so on the positive side. Once in a while, when you think about it, I think did you guys get the text I sent you yesterday with the song of the day?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I
it was a good one.
Yeah, especially the video that goes with it. But Dustin, not to get off your track, the pain it never goes away totally. But I think you have helped me to put it all more in perspective and to be very grateful for what we really do have, myself and all these guys, and to keep focusing on the positive part of it and to try to help out where we can with these younger guys. Before the lockdown, I had been volunteering over at Jefferson Barracks, helping the veterans who need not really physical therapy, but guys that need to go through the Nautilus machines for part of their therapy or prescribed by their doctors or whatever. I've been putting guys through their paces over there because, I'm a pretty big exercise guy, as you know. And that was really a lot of fun doing that. And it felt pretty useful doing it and swapping stories. Some of them were younger, some of them were older, but it helps put things in perspective, Dustin. And I think it makes you grateful for what we do have. Sometimes you tend to focus on how come I wound up over there and how come I went through all this shit. But I think it makes you realize, hey, it did happen, right? Can't change that. Be grateful for what you got, and go out and spread the good word and try to do something every day to help somebody else feel a little bit better. That's kind of what I'm trying to do.
That puts it perfectly in perspective.
You're such a great American, man. I love hanging out with you.
I don't know about that.
I do, man. You do all the right things.
I do, because your wife makes excellent butter cake.
Oh, you won't believe it, but I guess it's well over almost 2 years ago. I went on a plant-based diet.
Yeah.
And boy, she has found some recipes that are unbelievable. She made a vegan chocolate cream pie.
Wow.
Oh, baby. So maybe if you're really nice to her, if you guys make it over here, she'll share some of that.
We're always nice. Just ask my daughters. Oh wait, no, I've already been told like 3 times this week I'm ruining my daughter's
Someone has to.
Well,
Teenagers.
yeah. Well, in 10 years though, she'll be appreciative, or maybe less.
God, I hope so.
She will.
That's that's what we've got. I'm going to give you the last word if you want it, Mr. Braun.
Well, I suppose, again, we are grateful. I think I speak for most of the guys, all of the guys. We are grateful for what you are doing. You're putting a great message out there, not just for us, not just for Apache Troop, but for veterans everywhere. And I only hope that the people who are exposed to all of this, that are suffering, please take it to heart, and please go just sit down and talk to somebody, whether it's your bartender or your barber or your better half or whomever it is. Just go talk to somebody, and please be aware that you are not alone. There's a whole bunch of us out here, and there's a whole bunch of us that are willing to listen to you and help you. But you have to be the one to supply the impetus to get the ball rolling. It's got to be up to you.
Perfect. All right. I am going to give our sign off. Thank everyone for listening, watching. If you're watching on Facebook and you've never heard of us because a friend shared it, make sure to like our page to get more. We're planning on doing these every week with, I'm sure there'll be some holidays in there or something. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Tell your friends. I'm going to hit stop recording. Don't go anywhere, Jim. I'm just going to stop the recording. So if you're watching on Facebook, it's about to say videos interrupted, but it's not. It's just ending. Don't hit your computer. But thanks for joining us.